In the last video, we talked about how we could optimize something like a photograph. In this video, I want to focus on artwork that contains flat graphics and also how you can deal with transparency. So I have two documents that I'm going to be working with throughout this video. I have optimize noshadow.psd and then I have optimize shadow.psd. Here, with optimize noshadow.psd, we have a couple different options in terms of the file format that we could use. We could use PNG8 or we could use GIF, and it's really a judgment call on your behalf. If you come up to the File menu, from the File menu, you can choose Save for Web. In the Save for Web dialog box, what you want to do is probably come over to the 4UP tab. In this first quadrant, what you want to do is set the compression standard to GIF. When you do that, you'll notice that a color table is associated with this object. You can also see what the file size is. To reduce the file size, typically what you want to do is reduce the number of colors. And this is a game that you're going to have to play. You're going to have to come over here and choose fewer and fewer colors. And as long as the image holds up, you're probably in good shape. So if I come over to 32, still doesn't look too bad. And you'll notice that the file size is pretty low. Now, what happens if you want to use a PNG file format? Well, that can be done. Come over here and select this quadrant and choose PNG. But in this case, we're going to choose PNG8. PNG8 contains fewer colors than PNG24. And like GIF, we have the number of colors that we can choose. So again, if we come over and choose something like 32, you'll notice we're getting comparable results with the GIF format and the PNG format, each using 32 colors. The PNG is a bit smaller. That's really what you have to deal with when working with artwork with few colors. Flat artwork, things like icons, and more vector-like images. Now, compared to the JPEG, if you can see this in the video, the JPEG looks horrible. There's a lot of compression artifacting that you see here within the image, and the file size happens to be larger than the PNG8 and about the same size as the GIF. So PNG in this case really doesn't hold up. So you would want to go probably with PNG, but GIF would also be acceptable. Typically, I find that I only use GIFs at this point if I'm going to be creating something with a little bit of animation. So the scenario changes, however, if you begin to introduce transparency. So looking at optimize noshadow.psd, if we delete the background layer, we'll see that we have a transparent background, which is this grid that we're seeing in the background. Now, this piece of artwork is a circle, and I decided to use a circle on purpose because if you think about a circle being generated by square pixels, in order for you to get this curve, you need to use something called anti-aliasing. And because of that, if we come up to the File menu, and from there we choose Save for Web, you'll notice if you look really close, if you're using either GIF or PNG8, you get kind of like a little fuzzy effect here, and that's because Photoshop has some transitionary pixels between the foreground and the background, and it kind of creates that fuzz. And there's nothing that you can do about that when working with GIF or PNG8. The only option in this case is to use something like PNG24. 24 contains more colors, and the end result is something that's a lot more crisp and sharp. So when you're dealing with any shape other than a square or a rectangle, this will play a role. The other thing that becomes important is if you're working with drop shadows. In this case, where we have a piece of artwork that doesn't have a shadow, if we wanted to get rid of this additional canvas area, we could do that in a number of ways inside of Photoshop. We could change the canvas size. We could also come over and choose the crop tool and essentially come right to the edges of the artwork. That's not necessarily an option when you're dealing with a piece of artwork with a drop shadow. Again, if I come over here and delete the background layer, and yes, I do want to do this, so I'll click yes, it's really difficult for you to see where the artwork ends within this document. Something that you can do to trim this down to the smallest possible size is to come up to the Image menu, and from the Image menu, you can choose Trim. Then, in the Trim dialog box, you can base the trim on, in this case, transparent pixels, meaning pixels that don't contain any color information. Even though you can't see where this drop shadow ends, there's certainly some color values happening here. So in this case, if we choose transparent pixels and we trim away the top, left, bottom, and right, once you click OK, the whole image gets smaller, but there's enough space for this drop shadow. So now if we come back to the File menu and choose Save for Web, in this case, we have to go with PNG 24. If we choose something like PNG 8, you'll notice it's a complete mess where we have this drop shadow. And again, the great advantage of working with a transparent object is you'd have the ability to place this against any background and it will still look good. So once you're happy with this, you can come over and click Save. I'll go ahead and save this out on the desktop. I'll call it Optimize Shadow. It will have a PNG extension because that's the preset that I have selected here. Once you click Save, you're done and you've exported out an optimized version of this image.